Alright, chat, we're fricked. What are we gonna do?
If your job feels meaningless, you're not alone. Millions of people right now are spending their entire day doing meaningless work. But recently, this paradigm has actually shifted. The 9 to 5 is dying out, and the essential way our society functions has begun to change.
The 9 to 5 is ruining people. Stop with the 9 to 5. People have been doing it for less than 100 years, man.
Decades ago, stories like American Beauty and Fight Club spoke to millions when they showed bureaucratic office jobs as the meaningless prisons they really are. But even the author of Fight Club didn't know how much worse it was gonna get. So let's find out why most 9 to 5 jobs are useless, why they're dying out, and what the grim future of work will really look like in the coming years.
You will clock in, insert your catheter dedicated for your pee-pee, and you will not leave your desk. And you will piss in a bottle with a catheter.
You see, lots of people think their jobs are meaningless. In one of the more recent surveys on the topic, 33% of people asked think their job makes no meaningful contribution to society. Some industries is—
Wait! Medical and health services? Okay, that tracks. Yeah, so the ones that are like doctors or nurses are the happiest with their jobs, at least.
Much worse. For financial services, retail work, or hospitality, it's more like 50%. This won't be news to lots of people working in these industries, especially in bureaucratic office jobs. Books and films have been exploring this for decades now. The reason Fight Club became so popular was because of how relatable the main character's situation is. At the beginning of the story, we see a man who spends his life drifting through useless meetings and exchanging buzzwords with his boss. He sees his work not just as meaningless, but as an actual detriment to society.
Oh, does he talk about the consumerism as well, where he buys everything off IKEA? Yeah, I don't care about anything else except my little IKEA furniture.
It doesn't fulfill him, and the fruits of his labor haven't given him a real life. His fridge is full of condiments rather than real food. But we're still only seeing half of the full picture. Surveys tell us how people really feel about their own jobs, but it doesn't tell us about the jobs themselves. The fact that retail and hospitality workers are at the top of the list is telling. Their work was declared to be essential when lockdown hit. Society couldn't function without them. It's clear that this kind of work is needed, but it doesn't feel that way to people doing it.
And it's also because people don't get paid enough, man. Like, really? Oh, I mean, again, it sucks. I worked a retail job and I got treated like shit. If I got paid $50 an hour, I wouldn't be complaining, to be honest.
That how society treats the people working these jobs is what makes them disillusioned. The fact that their work is actually essential doesn't factor in. But for other sectors like financial services, we're not talking about essential work. As we'll find out, their feelings aren't based on how society doesn't reward their work. Instead, they're based on the fact that their work is meaningless to society itself. And it leads us to a crossroads. Work can be meaningless in two different ways. It can feel meaningless to the person doing the job, or it can be objectively meaningless to society itself. While the survey tells us a lot about the first way, it doesn't tell us anything about the second. Society is still only beginning to confront this. The idea that a large proportion of the workforce accomplishes nothing of value and contributes nothing to society. Many have suspected this to be the case for years.
If we continue in the way we've run our economy for the last 40 years, it will be disastrous.
So when we talk about the future of work, we're kind of talking about the future of the whole system.
That's right. I mean, you cannot have a prosperous economy without...
Well, it's infinite growth, and it doesn't take into account that it very well may just crash all the fuck down one day. We are borrowing people's labor without looking into the future, and the future is looking dimmer, and people are getting fed up.
Prosperous workers.
But no attempt was made to fully explore it until David Graeber released a book on the subject in 2018. Based on an earlier viral essay, he makes the case that a massive proportion of jobs, only half by his estimation, are actually meaningless in that they contribute nothing to society. According to him, there's a simple test to see if you have one of those jobs.
I watched a podcast that talked about this. His main gripe was people who do paper pushing. Paper pushing jobs, man. People getting paid like $30 an hour to do absolutely nothing. It's insane. No, I'm not even kidding. For those that don't know, I've never had a job like that. There are people out there who just push papers that mean absolutely nothing.
You stop showing up.
And by pushing papers, I mean they create documents or they create fake not laws, but like rules, or they have like middle management talking to them about creating jobs that don't actually do anything for the company itself. They basically have a made up job and they sit around doing nothing.
To work tomorrow, would the world care? Would any part of it be impacted in any way, outside of your similarly useless colleagues noticing your absence? David then further breaks these kinds of jobs down into 5 different categories. First, you've got the flunkies. Their only job is to make other jobs seem more important. Tasks that could be automated by machines invented
like middle managers. What?
Decades ago are kept around because it looks or feels better if a human does it. Like a doorman or receptionist whose only job is to tell people when other people have arrived at the office. The next are the goons. According to David, their only real purpose is to engage in costly battles with other goons hired by other companies. The legal world is full of them. Some lawyers only have one job: to waste the time and money of their competitors by filing frivolous, meaningless lawsuits. Ideally, for any CEO employing them, they'll waste more of your competitors' money than your own. Disney is especially notorious for their armies of legal goons.
Threatened to sue daycare or sue. There was a case of a guy, his kid died of leukemia, and he had a Spider-Man tombstone, a little gravestone for his little kid that died, and Disney sued them and made him take it down. I'm pretty sure. Yep, they made him change it. A fucking gravestone for a dead kid. Fuck Disney, dude.
Who busy themselves suing nurseries that put a picture of Mickey Mouse on the wall. We're almost halfway now. The third category are the duct tapers, who fix problems that shouldn't exist in the first place. Lots of people have had a job like this, where their whole workday could be eliminated if something was fixed somewhere else in the company. Some service jobs fall into this category. Imagine you're the CEO of—
I imagine like programmers get this a lot, people who do coding and stuff. It's like you could go to upper management and fix it like permanently and just sit down and spend a whole day doing it, but no, we don't want to do that. You just have to go and fix it forever.
A company that's been making defective umbrellas. People have been complaining a lot, and you could fix the production issue, or you could just hire more people to man the customer service hotline. Box tickers are the next category. People whose job it is to confirm the fact that other people are doing their job. They'll create whole systems whose only purpose is to log what other workers are doing, proving things which were already clear to everyone. And lastly, you've got the taskmasters, who assign meaningless work to other people. These are the managers who oversee other jobs, but only create—
they're orgs. Go do it.
Problems rather than solving them. They might do this by making people fill out assessment forms and compliance paperwork for no real reason, artificially extending the time it takes for other people to do their jobs.
Or even better, they make everyone get into a fucking room for a meeting that could have just been an email. That's my favorite one. And then they're like, guys, put your hands together. We're going overtime until lunchtime because we need to talk this out.
All of this is the basic makeup of the 9-to-5 job. This isn't to say all office jobs are like this. There's nearly always some useful people, but as companies get larger, they become rarer and rarer, while these useless parasitic roles become far more common. We've at least known that as organizations get larger, they become less efficient. It's called Price's Law, and the theory is that the square root of the total population of employees is half the work. In smaller organizations, this isn't as noticeable. In a company of 10 people, for example, 3 people are generally doing half of the work, but as a company gets larger, it only gets more lopsided. In a company of 100 people, 10 are doing half of the work. In a company of 1,000 people, only 30 are doing half of the work. This wouldn't be possible in modern companies without the kinds of meaningless jobs that David describes.
Oh my God.
This grossly
This
inefficient
makes sense.
system is what's defined the 9-to-5 for decades, and it's one of the root causes.
That's why change never happens easily either. I remember my first taste of that was someone was interviewing a guy at Blizzard that stopped working there, and they said that the bureaucracy of changing something in the game, like even a number, has to go through like 50 fucking people. And by the time it's gone through 50 fucking people, it's been 3 months. Whereas when World of Warcraft was in its infancy up until like probably like 2008 or 2009, they would pump out patches pretty frequently, like little hot fixes or like little bug changes. Now that takes like a freaking month. It's so inefficient, and it's all because of this stupid office bloat.
of why people working these kinds of jobs feel so aimless in life. But we've got to go even deeper to uncover the true reason why these kinds of jobs even exist in the first place. And as we get there, you'll see why this world of useless bureaucracy is destined to shrink into nothing over the next—
Good, thank fucking God, man. When I was in the nurse department that I worked in didn't have patients, they would have us preload, which essentially means to put new information from a patient's chart into one document so that the the doctor could read it before they arrived to the office. It was literally a nothing job that actually hurts patients, because if the doctor looked at the document instead of the chart and something got missed, it didn't get gone over. It was insane. So they created a problem out of nothing. That's scary. Like, yeah, what if the person mistypes instead of looking at the chart directly? Like, the chart will have less minimized error. Like, the more barriers you put up, the more difficult it becomes. Or the more likely you're to make a mistake. It's so dumb.
Next few decades. And that's going to bring with it a bunch of problems, which we'll see later in the video.
Oh. What kind of problems, though?
A lot of people tend to reach out to me to learn how to express or communicate their ideas in the form of full-length videos like I do, where you can share what you're passionate about in the most seamless, intuitive way possible, irrespective of whatever skill level you're at. And InVideo AI enables you to do just that. You simply start by typing in a prompt or going through one of the workflows based on the video you'd like to create. It's really game changing. From there on, you can fine tune your video and edit it by using simple text-based commands via the edit command box. Just type in whatever you'd like to change, like translate to French, add a voice, make the background music more—
I think that the translation feature is cool because translation is extremely expensive and also not effective, especially with, you know, making content instantly. I think that's okay, but making AI do video editing and shit is cringe, dude. Ugh. I don't want AI
And this
slop.
is really insane because you would never have to see or interact with the video timeline again. And you can actually edit your videos using just these text commands. And not only that, but you can also go one step further and clone your own voice so that all the videos you create can be narrated in your own voice. Unlike traditional video tools with steep learning curves that only solve parts of your video creation process, InVideo is the creative partner that you've always wanted, as it removes all the friction and puts you in the director's seat, letting you focus entirely on your vision and idea, while InVideo does all the heavy lifting.
is more boobies.
And you can try InVideo AI for free, as this will save you hundreds of dollars that you would otherwise spend on editing, animating, and other production costs. All of these useless jobs are because the system has gone wrong. By analyzing a few key contradictions that have sprung up over the past few decades, we get closer to the truth. Take productivity. It's a pretty simple economic principle. Just take the economic output of a country, often expressed as the GDP, and compare it to the total amount of hours people worked. Over the past 70 years, productivity in the US has gone up by over 250%, all thanks to—
Yeah, right. Chad, have you ever called Amazon and tried to get something fucking done with an error with your order? I have. I got nowhere for 3 months. I tried to like fix something on my account and I kept calling them and trying to fix it and nothing ever happened. It was horrible. I don't even bother. Next time I'm literally not even gonna bother. I'm just be like, how the heck did you manage to call Amazon? Oh no, I didn't. It was some person that wasn't even working in America that was answering my questions and just telling me to essentially shut the hell up and no one cares. Yeah, they were just like, it will fix sometime, miss.
technological progression and other factors.
Sorry.
Meanwhile, wages have actually stagnated. It's almost like people are only being paid for 15 hours of the 40-hour work weeks they're putting in. Decades ago, when people saw how fast productivity was rising, they logically thought it would mean that people wouldn't have to work long hours. Economists like Maynard Keynes, writing all the way back in the 1930s, predicted we'd be down to 15 hours by now. Obviously,
God, that would be so nice. 15 hours a week? That's insane. Everyone in my chat says they work like 40 to 60 hours. So there's some people work 80 hours a week, which is pretty sure is borderline illegal. Yeah, that's horrible. That would be amazing.
See, that's really not how it panned.
That's a joke. Chad, I mean, I don't blame this person 100 years ago for thinking like that. That would be awesome. I actually appreciate the fact that someone 100 years ago was like, robots are gonna take it over and people are gonna be happier. I like that kind of optimism, but the fact that that was said 100 years ago and it's not what it is now is in fact actually worse than it is, or it was like 100 years ago. It's like, yeah, about that.
Instead, hours have either remained stable or actually increased in lots of cases. For example, over half of UK workers regularly exceed their contracted hours, with 3.8 million doing unpaid overtime, which averages out to about 7.2 hours each week.
That's
European
insane.
workers are finding themselves handling more unpaid work than they have for decades. While
That's an hour on average every time you go to work. You overwork yourself by an hour, even though you already work 8 hours. That's a sad statistic.
in America, more than 400,000 people
Unpaid
work
too.
2 full-time jobs, or an incredible 13 million when you include part-time work as well. Anecdotally, lots of people feel that Keynes was actually right about their jobs, as often people in office jobs will say they only do about 15 hours of real work every
Oh, that's another thing. Oh, finishing all your work by like 11 o'clock and there's nothing to do, and then you're just sitting there on your phone, and then you get scolded by your manager. Oh, that happened to me all the time. I'd finish all my work by around about like, you know, sometimes like it'd be like 1 o'clock, but at the earliest I think it's probably like 10 or 11. You finish all your work and you're scrolling on your phone quietly at your desk. You're not bothering anyone. Or you're on your computer doing something, and you have to pretend like you're being productive. Oh my god, let me go home, you piece of shit.
week. The rest is made up of useless emails mixed with endless meetings, paperwork, and conference calls. It means that it could be the case that there aren't many truly meaningless jobs, just lots of mostly meaningless jobs with a small amount of real work mixed in. This would make meaningless jobs a good way to explain the productivity paradox. However well it all seems to fit together though, there's still the question of how all of this useless work could even exist. But the answer to this question exposes the entire system and how we get there by changing how we think about work. So far, we've been talking in purely economical terms.
Oh, that's actually another really good point. Yes, Chatter. You gotta love being rewarded with more job for doing your job. So what happens is if you get caught being quote-unquote unproductive after finishing all your work and there's nothing to do, I'm not saying like, oh, there's like 10 appointments and you've done all your appointments in the first half of your workday. I'm talking like there's literally like 3 hours where you can't do anything. They will make you do more work. Or even worse, they make you do other people's jobs or help them do their job because they're dog shit at their job. Yeah,
but the modern 9 to 5 and the modern world of work clearly doesn't make sense economically. But it does make sense politically though. Before the rise of meaningless jobs and meaningless work, there was a pretty clear deal between companies and their employees. The company would offer stable, meaningful work in exchange for a good salary. The employee got enough to build their own life, start their own family, and their work usually gave them a place in the community as well. Meanwhile, the company got a loyal, hard-working employee. In the wake of the Second World War and massive political instability, it was a necessary deal for them to make with the people. As the 20th century went on though, this deal between employees and companies fell apart. Fast forward to the 90s and Fight Club gives us a pretty good picture of how it had changed.
You used to get rewarded in America at least, probably like 40 years ago. I've talked to some Gen Xers and Boomers that told me stories of them like climbing the corporate ladder and staying with the same company. Like, I don't know, like an office company or like a data company. And they said they got rewarded for that, and now that doesn't happen because they don't give a fuck about you. You're just a cog, that you're replaceable instantly.
Meaningless jobs had fully come in.
And I'm not saying that corpos really cared about you back then, but at least there was an illusion that you were part of like a family company where you could climb the ladder and get more and also live in a fucking house that was sponsored by your company or whatever. That used to be a thing. They would sponsor or like at least pay part of your rent or actually gave you good health insurance deals or dental. Yeah, now it's not really a thing anymore.
Now there was no social contract anymore. Before, when jobs still had meaning, it required specialized skills that took years to learn. With meaningless office jobs, one drone is the same as another. So companies no longer had any incentive to stay loyal when it came to most of their jobs. Lots of people no longer made enough money to build a family or create meaning outside of their career. And the higher paying jobs that could support a family were often those meaningless middle class jobs. The hours for these kinds of jobs also went up over time, while community slowly dies out in society. People were left with no meaning in their work and no meaning outside of their work either, other than blind consumerism. And that's the trap that millions of men fell into, and the trap that the main character finds himself at the beginning of Fight Club. At this point in time, the only thing that the 9-to-5 still really offered was a stable income. There was still a sense of safety for people working these kinds
about that. I don't know about anymore.
of jobs. Even if it was a mental prison, at least they fed you every day. But today, you can't even be sure of the stability anymore. This was the last thing that kept the 9-to-5 going, but it's on its way out. The only thing left that's even recognizable about work today is that it keeps people busy, and that's the only thing most jobs have to accomplish now. This is the true reason why most likely your job is completely pointless. Artificial, meaningless work only exists to keep people occupied and focused on their own survival. While the old system worked fine, it's far more profitable to run the world this way instead. Gradually, over the course of decades, CEOs turned up the pressure a little more on their employees. Prices went up ever so slightly more each month, while wages remained static.
I hated COVID, man. COVID ruined so many people. I hated it so much. I'd wake up one month and then the next month somehow my grocery bill increased, and I'm just like, why is this happening, bro?
The hours still needed to be worked, even though there wasn't enough to do, so meaningless work and meaningless jobs came into the picture. As the turmoil of the 20th century was forgotten, it became accepted that people didn't need real incentives to keep showing up to work. The carrot wasn't necessary anymore, only the stick. If you don't work, then you'll eventually starve, so you've got no choice. And if you don't have any money, people won't respect you if you don't have the right products. Now, there was never really a global conspiracy for this to happen. It just makes sense as a collection of millions of individual decisions. Companies saw their competitors squeeze their employees harder and get away with it, so they did the same. Today, the 9-to-5 job is a relic of a bygone time when that amount of work was needed, and it still brought stability and meaning to people's lives. Meaningless jobs
And the boomers hate that you didn't have to sit at work from 9 to 5 and you could just work from home. There's a lot of boomers in descent from older generations, that millennials and Gen Z were getting away with basically just doing their job and then logging out, essentially.
Became the norm. But it wasn't until the 2008 crisis that the next phase began at work. The 2008 crisis represented the height of greed and negligence on the part of those in power. Meanwhile, millions who still believed in the old system and the old social contract overplayed what little they had left and bought into predatory housing loans in an attempt to achieve the American dream. When the bubble burst, it left regular people poorer than ever, vulnerable to exploitation.
All the middle class shrunk even more. The middle class used to be the middle class. Like, there was the most people. Yeah, that took a fucking hit. And then COVID absolutely destroyed that. Like 12 years later.
2008 was a tumultuous year for the economy.
Bad.
The housing market collapse created one financial crisis after another, and it often seemed as if the news could only get worse.
The world still hasn't recovered from this. Things like zero-hour contracts became common. Deals which offer no stability whatsoever.
I actually don't know what a zero-hour contract is. What is that? Zero-hour contract. An employment agreement where an employer doesn't guarantee a minimum number of hours and the employee doesn't have to accept any work offered. Oh my god. Yeah, I remember this. Yeah, you basically, like, if the job doesn't have work, you can go fuck yourself. Yep. Classic.
To employees, and at the same time, new technology opened the door to a new kind of working system.
Yeah,
although, as we'll find out, it's horrifyingly similar to what you'd find in the least advanced places in the world. It's the new gig economy, and it represents the final nail in the coffin for the 9-to-5 job. First, we went from needing one adult working per family to 2. Now, that isn't even enough. As we've seen from the 13 million people.
I had a friend of a friend that told me a story of a woman that had a family of 3, And both the parents worked as much as they could while taking care of the 3 kids, and they also took out credit cards in order to sustain themselves. And then eventually what happens is that you have to juggle your credit to keep up with inflation, and then eventually you just become homeless. It's insane how people have to live like that. Yeah. 3 kids, both the parents are working, or at least the mom is working part-time doing like Uber Eats or something, and then the dad's like working like an average job, and it's still not enough. And they're just like having to live off of credit cards in order to like live off of it or sustain themselves. I don't know. It's pretty fucked.
People working the equivalent of 2 full-time jobs. For people in low-paying jobs, the 9-to-5 died a long time ago. It's all got a simple explanation. Wages have stagnated while the cost of living has risen. People just can't get by without picking up extra work, creating a population of people desperate for anything to see them through the month. Fast download speeds from cellular networks, combined with features of mobile phones, also enable the development of a new kind of company.
That's the
Uber
answer.
is the classic example because they got there first. Traditional taxi companies have a lot of different responsibilities to their drivers. They often provide the vehicles, the license with the government to do business, and sometimes all the taxi driver has to do is just drive the taxi. The company then takes the rest of the responsibility. Uber created a different kind of system where all they really do is connect customers with drivers. They don't provide the vehicles, the training, or really anything other than a way for people to monetize driving. They're just the middleman siphoning money out of an economic system that already existed, while transforming it in the process. This model eliminates meaningless work, because it does away with paying people for their time to begin with. Even 0-hour contracts pay people for the time they expend. Uber and other companies like it only pay for the actual work people do. As such, it's an incredibly profitable system for the people who operate it once they get large enough to take control of the market. Industries like driving or food delivery have already been taken over. Soon it could spread to everything else as well as the technology improves and these kinds of platforms can manage different kinds of work.
Yeah, but then it becomes a monopoly, and that's the problem. Uber and Lyft, like Lyft doesn't really even exist, to be completely honest, in this market. Yeah, like Uber is just the king of this market. They cornered it, and that's why they can do whatever the hell they want now.
The scale of this change is staggering.
Not good either.
The gig economy is now set to grow from over $500 billion to over $1.8 trillion by 2032, encompassing everything from just delivery drivers to high-end consultants, making up 12% of the total labor worldwide. These companies will frame this as a new way forward. They'll imply that it gives people more independence, like they've taken control of their own work, and as such they can enjoy the fruits of their labor. In reality though, it represents a far more sinister slide backwards. All you need to do to see this is to look at the more exploitative economies with even less protection for people than ours. The gig economy is also being used to great effect by new companies like Shein, for example. The $66 billion company has made its money through the gig economy model for its clothes manufacturers.
Yeah, Temu.
Workers aren't paid a salary.
Drop shipping. They directly drop ship. That's another thing that's really horrible now, is that Amazon used to have at least like a semi-standard for like getting products, and now they're getting drop shipped from these factories and they don't give a fuck because it's making them so much money.
Instead, they're paid per product they can make, in the same way as Uber drivers are paid per trip they make. While there might be legal limits on hours they can work, they're often ignored. People work 7-day weeks from the early morning well into the night. Talk to Uber.
Amazon workers do this as well, packing your boxes and shit in your town. They get treated like shit. Pissing in bottles, dude. No overtime. Go frick yourself.
Uber drivers, and you'll find this is often true for them as well. The company obviously doesn't mind, and the workers don't have a choice. It's either this or even worse, poverty and starvation for their families. While it isn't this extreme in the West yet, the rise of the gig economy and the death of the 9-to-5 shows that
it's getting there. Yeah, Amazon is definitely getting there. I can't wait for like the towns that Amazon's gonna build, because they want Amazon workers to just like go shit, eat, piss, and sleep, and then go right back to work. Yeah, little towns, Amazon town.
is just around the corner. It's inevitable because in the short term, it's far more profitable for companies to operate this way. As high-up Silicon Valley investors like Naval Ravikant have predicted, the world's economy is going more individualistic.
It's becoming much easier to communicate with people. Gig economy, I can send you small amounts of money, I can hire you through an app, I can rate you afterwards. So we're seeing an atomization of the firm. We're seeing the optimal size of the firm shrinking. It's most obvious in Silicon Valley. Tons and tons of startups constantly coming up and shaving off little pieces of businesses from large companies and turning them into huge markets.
And the effects of this on normal people could be disastrous. All those benefits people used to get from the social contract are gone in the gig economy. You're not even an employee anymore, so there's no benefits or even paid time off. There's also no stability either. If you can't work tomorrow because of an injury, then you're on your own completely.
Or if you get a bad rating from some guy that doesn't even like you, or you sneezed the wrong way, or they might just not like you because of how you look. You're ugly, they give you a 1-star rating and it's over for you. Yeah, they just like go, go fuck yourself.
The pay for this kind of work is low as well because the people doing the work have no power or leverage in the system to change it. It means that there's no way to build a family or meaning outside of work if you're constantly having to put in hours, especially if you're being paid below minimum wage for your work. It means that people in this position no longer have any real stake in the system at all. It creates apathy, resentment, and anger, the same things we're seeing all over culture today.
Mental illness!
The elites make even more money, creating even more inequality, frantically driving a need for more materialism and status symbols in society to separate yourself from the masses. The only good news, if you can call it that, is that the system will end up being completely unsustainable. Those in power have been delaying this collapse for years, but that can only work for so long. The further it goes, the more people realize that there is no way out and no way to build a life.
They want to kill the middle class as well. Yeah. They want to create a lower class and an upper class. That's it. No more middle class.
System like this. Eventually young people...
They already killed it. I know what you're trying to say, but not literally. Yeah, we're getting there. Just give it a little bit more time. Maybe like 5 years. Then it'll be completely dead.
With nothing to gain by playing the game will just flip the table. While this might change things, it's not really a good result either. Without the lie of the system, what's left except for anarchy? While it might be cathartic to see it all coming tumbling down, it's rarely gone well afterwards historically. Pretty soon people are going to be missing the days when the meaninglessness of your job was the only thing you ever had to worry about. At least the main character from Fight Club had enough to own his own apartment and his own collection of meaningless IKEA furniture. The alternative we're seeing today with the death of the 9-to-5 is just as meaningless when it doesn't give you anything in return at all.
It's time to get enslaved, chat, by the upper class, chat.